This is one of the games this weekend that I find really hard to call. In fact, all three matches in the Six Nations this weekend in round 4 I think are quite fascinating for various different reasons. And Wales against France on Sunday is no different. So welcome back to the channel. The comment section is where you can have your say. What do you make of Wales? What do you make of France? And how do you see this match going at the weekend? Like the video, subscribe to the channel, all that sort of stuff as usual. But I find the complexion of this game quite interesting. I have a real mix of feelings about it because on the one hand, I look at France and everyone's pretty down on them. A lot of negativity, understandably so, and I'll go into the reasons for that. But they are still, I think, a quality outfit when you look at the players they have. But they're in a bit of a dip at the moment. Whereas Wales, there is a kind of trusting in what they're trying to do. There is positivity, but then they find themselves 3 defeats from 3 so far in this championship. So when I look at this game, that's part of the reason that I have a mix of feelings. I don't know whether to look at it and look at the position France are in and think there's a real possibility here for Wales to spring an upset, or actually, is this weekend going to be, or is this game in particular going to be a match that shows us the disparity between teams in the Six Nations? Like, you know how we all talk about it, that there is a real big difference between the teams at the bottom and the teams at the top. And for the most part this year, that's focusing on Ireland because they're so dominant. Their margins of victories in their games so far have all been over 20 points and all the other matches have been a lot closer. So the disparity is focused on with Ireland. But I just wonder if France do win this game, given how negative a space they're in, whether this will actually be quite a good sign of the difference between nations. I don't know. Hopefully that makes sense. But I think there is a possibility that Wales can do it. I'll get onto them in just a second. When I talk about the French negativity, they could easily be 3 games, 3 defeats. If it wasn't for a lucky call with the final play of the game against Murrayfield against Scotland, where Scotland didn't get the try awarded, and if it wasn't for the Paolo Garbisi missed penalty, France could be sitting here 3 defeats from 3, potentially looking at having a wooden spoon. And it does seem like the World Cup quarter-final, they haven't been able to get over that as much. I suppose we'll maybe wait until the end of the tournament to fully draw conclusions, but they aren't as convincing an outfit at the moment. The style of rugby, what they're trying to execute isn't going as well. And I don't think that's just down to Antoine Dupont. You look at the style they're playing this Six Nations, they're kicking the ball less. They used to kick more than any other team. They're kicking it less. Tactically, they don't seem to be able to execute as much as they were. And they lost their attack coach as well. And their attack has looked pretty limp in the opening 3 rounds of the championship. But as I say, on paper at least, you still think that there is heaps of quality in this French team. As for Wales, there is positivity, as I say. They could and should have won 2 games. They will look back and feel they should have beaten England. They maybe should have completed the comeback against Scotland. So kind of what gives this weekend when we look at this game? And I think people are pretty positive about Wales. It is a match that is being pinpointed as a potential upset, as Wales potentially upsetting France. I don't know. I look at where the 2 teams are at the moment, and it wouldn't be a huge shock. I suppose you've got the Cardiff factor to throw in here. And if this is a French side that are as fragile as we seem to think, and as fragile as I've spoken about already in terms of their performances and what we're seeing on the pitch, if that Cardiff cauldron can be the sort of atmosphere we know it has the potential to be, and that it's capable of, it could become a very, very uncomfortable afternoon for the French. Which is why I think it's so important from their perspective that they start well and that they don't give this Wales team a foothold into the match. So if I'm being honest, I struggle to look past France because I think this Welsh team is a little bit too green. But having said that, there are a lot of reasons that I could easily convince myself that Wales are going to do it. But let's get into the selection itself. That's kind of my general thoughts on why it's such a tantalising game, I think, to try and analyse and look ahead to. And whilst I think it could be a great game on the Sunday, often the Sunday game in the Six Nations can end up being a bit of a damp squib, but I think this could be quite fascinating. In terms of selection, starting with Wales, I think a lot of the decisions, particularly in the forwards, comes down to power. There was two key areas that really caught my eye, which was the return of Will Rowlands, who has been coming back to fitness, returning to play. So he comes into the team. I think he's a really good second row, Will Rowlands. I've always been quite impressed with him for Wales. And that shifts Dafydd Jenkins to 6, which is amazing, really, in that he's never started a professional game at 6 for Exeter or Wales. But you can probably see what they're trying to do. It's physicality. This French pack, whilst they might not be playing well, are massively physical, even though they actually, by their standards, would probably be a bit disappointed with some of their outings from a physical perspective and physical dominance in the Six Nations so far. So I think that is specifically what Wales are trying to combat. And then the other interesting bit of the team news is what Warren Gatland has done in the centres. And with Nick Tompkins and George North not being a part of it, that is a big, big gamble, losing that experience and quality to give younger guys a go. I saw quite a good explanation of it earlier this week, though, which was, when you think of this Wales team, the biggest problem in terms of personnel has been they've had loads of guys that have bags of experience but probably haven't been transitioned out of the team early enough, which meant underneath you had a load of young players that had no experience at all. It was a huge issue for Warren Gatland when he took over the reins before the Six Nations last year, looking at the Wayne Pivac era and thinking there hadn't been that rotation within the squad. He was left with very old experienced players and then nothing in terms of experience underneath them. A lot of young guys that hadn't really been capped much at all. So with that in mind, I think this is the sort of selection where you look at that decision for this game in the centres and it starts to make sense. I think, yes, it's a risk, but these players have to get game time at some point. What an opportunity for them to do it. What an opportunity for them to try and make a statement as well. But I think that, for me, is why those selections do make sense from a Wales point of view. Any other thoughts, Wales fans? Let me know. There's been good stuff this Six Nations and obviously a lot of areas that they need to work on. In terms of France, 8 changes in total. So over half the team changed from that draw against Italy. It's not the kind of reaction to that result as many might expect. Once you actually dig into it, I think 7 of those changes are either due to injury, suspension, or players like Aldrit, for example, who were previously injured now being available again. So it's not kind of wholesale changes specifically off the back of the result against Italy. I don't think it's as alarming as it would make out if that was the case. But I feel like maybe it's a good time for this French team to have a number of different changes. Like, I was looking at the team when it came out, and it wouldn't have been so long ago at the World Cup last year, in the Six Nations last year, France lose Jonathan Danty, and I'm looking at that and thinking this French team is completely different without Jonathan Danty in the side. He's a brilliant inside centre and has been for a long time. But actually, given where they are and everything I've already spoken about in the video, maybe this is a good time for other players to come in. Players that are playing well in the top 14, some younger guys that don't have as much experience, some players that maybe don't have quite the baggage of that quarter-final defeat, potentially. Also, someone like Thomas Ramos comes in at fly half, who again has been excellent in the top 14. Mathieu Jalibert is injured, how he goes. It just feels like all of a sudden it's a different looking French side. Maybe it's going to make no difference to the performance and what we see, and this is just a funk that the French, no matter who they select, are going to have to ride out, and that coaching group are going to have to find the answers for. But when I looked at the team and I looked at 8 changes, there's still quality there, and I just wondered whether this was a good time. In a world of continuity, and the buzzword this week for any of you that have followed England's press conferences and all their build-up to the game with Ireland, it's been about continuity, not changing too much, wanting to build combinations. Actually, for this French side, I wonder whether now is a good time to have some fresh faces coming in there. So I think it's an intriguing game. Even as I've been talking there, I said earlier, I think France are going to do it. I will stick with that. It's not a bold prediction at all, because they'll be the favourites. Wales have lost all 3 games. They're a young team, etc. I wouldn't be completely shocked, though, if Wales were to do it. If things fell their way, if the crowd get into it, if it becomes a really uncomfortable afternoon for France, who have played in fits and starts throughout this championship, in all honesty. But I will just go with the French. I think they will edge it. But what do you make of it? This whole complexion of this game, I think, is really interesting because of where those two sides are, the stuff I spoke about at the start of the video. So those are my general thoughts. Appreciate you watching. Comment down below, French fans, Wales fans, neutrals, how do you see this game going? Enjoy all the action over the weekend in the Six Nations. Make sure you like the video. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel as well. That way you just don't miss anything, and yeah, massively helps out. So yeah, enjoy all the action. I'll see you in the next one.